Silence crashed through Belmont Hall the moment Grant backed away from the altar. 300 high society guests gasped as he abandoned his bride. Humiliation scorched Camille's cheeks, but before a single tear could fall, heavy footsteps echoed across the marble. A notoriously ruthless crime boss stepped out of the shadows. Then she's mine. The September sun poured through the towering arched windows of Belmont Hall in Tarrytown, New York, washing the grand ballroom in a golden, ethereal glow. It was supposed to be the society wedding of the decade. Camille Sinclair, sole heiress to the Sinclair banking dynasty, was marrying Grant Ashworth, the golden boy heir of Ashworth Aviation. The union had been hailed by the Wall Street Journal as a flawless merger of old money and modern wings. But to Camille, it was simply the day she finally anchored her life. She stood at the head of the aisle, an absolute vision in a bespoke Elie Saab gown of Chantilly lace and crushed silk, her veil cascading 10 feet behind her over a carpet of 20,000 white peonies. A string quartet played a melancholic Pachelbel's canon in D. Everything was meticulously curated, down to a guest list that included New York's governor, 2 senators, and the elite crust of Manhattan. Yet as Camille began her slow walk down the aisle, her arm looped through her godfather Edmund's, she noticed something deeply unsettling. Grant looked entirely wrong. Usually the picture of arrogant composure, Grant was bone white, sweating through the collar of his Tom Ford tuxedo, his clasped hands trembling so violently, his diamond cufflinks seemed to vibrate. He wasn't looking at his bride with awe. He was looking past her, eyes darting toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom, as if expecting a bomb to detonate. Camille's smile faltered, though she kept her chin high for the flashing cameras. She reached the altar. Edmund kissed her cheek, and she turned to take Grant's hands. His palms were ice-cold and slick with sweat. "Grant," she whispered beneath the lace, "are you all right? You're shaking." He didn't answer. His gaze was nailed to a point in the shadows near the back row, the section reserved for his family's private business associates. Reverend Whitfield, a fixture of the Sinclair family for 30 years, cleared his throat and offered a warm smile. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice filling the vaulted ceilings, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God and this company to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The ceremony proceeded, but the air grew unspeakably heavy. Camille kept trying to catch Grant's eye, but he looked like a man marched to a firing squad. Then came the vows. "Grant William Ashworth, do you take Camille to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part." A suffocating silence fell. 3 seconds. 5. 10. The governor coughed awkwardly in the third row. Camille's mother, Vivian, sat rigid in the front pew, clutching her Chanel purse white-knuckled. "Grant," Camille whispered, panic climbing her throat. She squeezed his fingers. "Say I do." Grant snatched his hands away, as if she had burned him. He stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the hem of her opulent gown. "I can't," he choked, his voice cracking violently. A collective gasp ripped through 300 people. The string quartet stopped dead with a screeching, discordant scrape of a cello bow. "Grant, what are you doing?" his father, Harrison Ashworth, hissed, half rising from his seat. "I can't do it," Grant shouted, his voice bouncing off the stone walls, panic consuming his features. Then he did something no one expected. He lunged forward and grabbed Camille's wrist. "Come with me, right now. We run, together. There's a jet at the county airfield. Please, Cammy, if we're gone in 20 minutes. "Run from what?" Camille demanded, her heart hammering like a trapped bird as humiliation wrapped around her throat. Whispers were detonating across the room. Phones were rising discreetly from every pew. "Grant, you're embarrassing both our families. Stop this right now." "You don't understand," he cried, yanking at her arm. "The trust didn't clear. The lawyers found the clause this morning. I can't access the Sinclair accounts. Without the money, they'll kill me, Cammy. Come with me or I'm a dead man." And in that instant, access the Sinclair accounts. Camille understood exactly what she was to him. She wrenched her wrist free of his grip with a force that startled them both. "Then run," she said quietly. Grant's face collapsed. He turned on his heel, and the heir to the Ashworth empire literally ran. He didn't walk. He sprinted down the side aisle, shoving past a bewildered groomsman, bursting through the side doors, and leaving his bride abandoned at the altar of a $2 million wedding. Camille stood paralyzed as the crowd's hum swelled into a roar. Her mother let out a strangled sob. The betrayal was so brutally public, she couldn't even form a tear. She stood alone in her mountain of white silk, staring at the empty space where her future had been, realizing the last 3 years of her life had been a meticulously orchestrated lie. Then the heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom slammed shut with a sound like a thunderclap. A lock clicked, a mechanical thud that somehow silenced all 300 panicking guests at once. The murmurs died in their throats. At the back of the room, blocking the only main exit, stood a line of 4 men in immaculate dark suits. And from the shadows of the arched colonnade, a single figure emerged, walking slowly down the center aisle. The man who walked down the white-petaled aisle did not hurry. Every step was measured, radiating an authority so absolute it thinned the oxygen in the room. He wore a charcoal Brioni suit fitted with lethal perfection, dark hair swept back, jaw sharp and shadowed. But it was his eyes that stopped Camille's breath. Pale, arctic gray, entirely devoid of mercy. Whispers erupted again, frantic, terrified hisses this time. Is that? Oh God. Don't look at him. Don't. It's Zorin. What the hell is Zorin doing here? Camille knew the name. Everyone from Wall Street to the district attorney's office knew Nikolai Zorin, undisputed head of the Zorin Bratva, a ghost to the FBI, the man who controlled the eastern seaboard's underground freight, gambling, and gold pipelines. A monster in bespoke wool who did not attend society weddings unless he'd come to buy a politician or bury a name. Nikolai stopped at the foot of the altar, ignoring the trembling Reverend Whitfield and the pale elite in the front rows entirely. His gaze locked onto Camille. Up close, the sheer magnetism of his danger was overwhelming. He studied her standing there in her abandoned wedding gown, his expression unreadable, then turned his head slightly toward the pew, where Harrison Ashworth was practically dissolving into the upholstery. Your son is a very fast runner, Nikolai noted, his voice a rich, dark baritone that carried effortlessly through the silent hall. Unfortunately for him, my men are waiting beside his Gulf Stream. He won't make the runway. Mr. Zorin, please. Harrison Ashworth's voice broke as the aviation magnate trembled. We can restructure. I just need a little more time. Nikolai didn't even glance at him. His arctic eyes never left Camille. Grant Ashworth owes my organization $40 million, a debt incurred by using my private airfields to move his own unsanctioned cargo. Gold and stones, untaxed and unsanctioned, which he then managed to lose to a customs seizure at Teterboro. He believed that by marrying you today, Camille, he could unlock the Sinclair family trust and repay me. A desperate, pathetic scheme from a desperate, pathetic boy. Camille felt the blood drain from her face. Her entire relationship with Grant, the dinners in Paris, the sunset proposal on Lake Como, all of it a front, a frantic scramble to secure $40 million to save his own miserable life from the underworld. The realization landed, like a physical blow to the stomach. When his lawyers informed him this morning that your late father's trust cannot be liquidated for another 5 years, marriage certificate or not, Nikolai continued, terrifyingly calm, he realized he had nothing left to offer me, so he ran. Camille's spine stiffened. She was humiliated. Her heart was shattered. But the Sinclair pride, the same iron pride her father had used to build a banking empire, flared suddenly to life. She would not cower before this criminal, no matter how powerful he was. Then what are you doing here, Mr. Zorin? Camille demanded, and her voice did not shake. If Grant doesn't have your money and my trust is locked, you have no business interrupting this ceremony. The Ashworth's debts are not my problem. A slow, dangerous smirk touched the corner of Nikolai's mouth, the smile of a predator who had just discovered unexpectedly fascinating prey. But they are your problem, Camille, he said softly, stepping up onto the altar. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, cedarwood and something faintly metallic. Because to secure the loan in the first place, Grant used your name. He forged a board resolution pledging Sinclair Bank itself as collateral. If I walk out of here empty-handed, I don't just ruin the Ashworths. I hand that paper to the federal regulators, and the Sinclair banking empire collapses by Monday morning. Your mother loses her home. Your father's legacy dies in federal indictments. You're lying, Camille breathed, but her eyes darted to Harrison Ashworth, who looked away, and that was confirmation enough. Grant had chained her family to his sinking ship to save himself. "I don't lie," Nikolai stated. He raised one large, scarred hand and gently, almost reverently, tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The contrast of his rough touch against delicate lace sent a violent shiver down her spine. Grant failed to deliver what he promised. "But I am a businessman, Camille. If the boy will not settle what is owed," his arctic gaze swept over her white dress before locking onto her fierce, defiant eyes. "Then she's mine." The words dropped like an anvil in the silent hall. "Excuse me?" Camille said, her voice sinking to a dangerous whisper. "I need legitimate fronts," Nikolai said bluntly, speaking only for her ears now. "I need clean banking channels, which your family controls. I need entry into the elite circles that spit on my name. And you need protection from the federal noose Grant just tied around your neck. The solution is simple. You walk out of these doors with me right now. You become a Zorin." "You want me to marry you?" Camille asked in disbelief. "You're insane." "I am pragmatic," Nikolai corrected. He extended his hand toward her. It was a demand, not a request. "You can stay here. You can cry over a coward who sold you out, and watch your mother dragged into federal court while everything your father built is auctioned off. Or you can take my hand, walk out of here with your dignity, and become untouchable." Camille looked out at the crowd. These were her friends. The elites she had grown up beside, yet all she saw was fear and apathy. The governor was studying his shoes. Her own bridesmaids were shrinking back against the altar flowers. No one was coming to help her. Grant had thrown her to the wolves. She looked at her mother, weeping softly into a handkerchief, shaking her head. "Without the money, they'll kill me," Grant had begged. But Camille wasn't Grant. She wasn't a coward. She turned back to the ruthless, terrifying crime lord standing before her. Nikolai Zorin was the devil in bespoke wool. But right now, the devil was offering the only road that saved her family's empire. Camille took a deep breath, smoothed the front of her ruined wedding dress, and lifted her chin, her eyes burning with a cold fire that made Nikolai's smirk widen into a genuine smile. Without a word, Camille Sinclair placed her small, trembling hand into the massive, unyielding grip of the Bratva king. His fingers closed around hers, warm and iron. He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping across the terrified elite. "The wedding is cancelled," he announced coldly. "The bride is coming with me." Together, the heiress and the crime boss walked down the aisle of white peonies, leaving the shattered remains of Grant Ashworth's world behind them. The oak doors swung open before them, and as Camille stepped out of Belmont Hall into a waiting convoy of black SUVs, she understood exactly what she had done. She hadn't just saved her life. She had signed it over to the underworld. The convoy of black Escalades tore down the Sawmill River Parkway like a blade. Inside the tinted rear cabin, the silence was deafening. Camille sat rigid against butter-soft leather, her massive tulle skirt crushed against the door. Nikolai sat opposite, pouring 2 glasses of Macallan 25 from a crystal decanter, his scarred knuckles grazing her trembling fingers as he handed one over. "Drink," he commanded softly. "You're in shock, and there's paperwork waiting at Oyster Bay." "Oyster Bay?" she whispered, taking the heavy crystal. "My estate. As of tomorrow morning, your legal residence," Nikolai replied, resting his arm along the window frame, his watch catching the passing streetlights. "My attorneys have already drafted the certificate. We bypass the church, a private judge in Manhattan. By noon, you'll be Camille Zorin." "Just like that," she whispered, taking a burning sip. "You buy a wife to wash your money." His arctic eyes locked onto hers, stripping away the bravado she was fighting to hold. "I didn't buy you, Camille. I salvaged you. Grant Ashworth was going to let you drown." Over the next 2 weeks, Camille's world was rewritten. The Zorin estate in Oyster Bay was a 30,000 square foot fortress of granite and bulletproof glass behind 12-foot iron gates. Her master suite dwarfed her mother's entire penthouse. Her closet filled overnight with Givenchy and Saint Laurent. She was a prisoner, yet free within the walls. Nikolai never locked a door, and to her profound surprise, he never once approached her bed. He treated her with a terrifying, calculating respect. They ate at opposite ends of a 20-foot mahogany table while he discussed freight corridors and political leverage, testing the razor-sharp financial mind she'd inherited from her father. He quickly realized Camille Sinclair was no decorative heiress. She was a brilliant strategist. But the ghost of Grant Ashworth still haunted the perimeter of her new life. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. Camille was in Nikolai's private study, reviewing correspondent banking files, when a burner phone inside the desk drawer began to vibrate. Nikolai was in the city, settling a dispute with the Vitali family. She hesitated, then pulled the cheap plastic phone from the drawer and answered. "Zorin, please, I need more time," a raspy, pathetic voice begged. Her blood ran cold. "Grant." Silence hissed across the line. Then his voice curdled from terrified to venomous. "Camille, of course. Already warming the Russian's bed. Tell me, did you enjoy the wedding present I left you?" "You left me a federal indictment, you coward," she snarled, knuckles whitening around the phone. "You mortgaged my family to save your own skin. Where are you?" "Toronto," Grant sneered. "And you're going to help me." "I kept the original forged resolutions, plus files linking your mother's accounts to Zorin's gold pipeline. Wire $15 million to a Cayman account by midnight, or everything goes to the FBI. Zorin falls, and you and your mother fall with him. You wouldn't dare." "I have nothing left to lose," he screamed. "Send the money, Camille." The line went dead. She sat frozen, the dial tone ringing in her ear, trapped. If she told Nikolai, he would hunt Grant to the ends of the earth and drag an avalanche of police heat onto the Sinclair name. If she didn't, Grant would bury her mother. "He's bluffing." Camille gasped and spun around. Nikolai stood in the study doorway, his charcoal overcoat dripping rain, his expression a thundercloud of lethal calm. He crossed the room, took the burner from her shaking hand, and snapped it in half. "How much did you hear?" she whispered. "Enough," Nikolai said, walking to a hidden wall safe behind a Kandinsky. He entered a code, retrieved a thick manila folder, and dropped it on the desk before her. "I wasn't going to show you this until you were ready. Grant has forced my hand." Camille opened the file. Inside were grainy surveillance photos of Grant in a dim booth at the Baccarat Hotel bar. Across from him sat a silver-haired man in wire-rimmed glasses. Clipped to the photos, a wire receipt, $400,000 from Ashworth Aviation to a private medical group in Zurich, and a glossy brochure for an exclusive long-term wellness sanatorium in the Swiss Alps. "What is this?" Camille asked, her voice trembling. "The man in the photo is Dr. Elias Brandt," Nikolai said, his voice scraped clean of emotion. "A psychiatrist who sells diagnoses to wealthy men. 3 weeks before your wedding, my people intercepted his retainer. Grant never planned to simply spend your money, Camille. Marrying you was only step one." He leaned over the desk, planting his hands flat on the mahogany, arctic eyes burning into hers. Step 2 was Brandt. Falsified evaluations, doctored prescription records showing instability, paranoia, dependency. Within a year of your honeymoon, your loving husband was going to have you declared mentally incompetent and committed to that clinic in the Alps. As your spouse and conservator, Grant would have taken full control of the Sinclair estate. You weren't supposed to die, Camille. You were supposed to disappear, locked in a beautiful room on a mountain, drugged and discredited, while he signed your name for the rest of your life. The air vanished from Camille's lungs. The room spun. Grant, the man who had kissed her forehead, held her hand, promised her forever, had hired a doctor to erase her mind on paper and bury her alive in a gilded asylum. When his lawyers found your father's clause, the trust freezes for 5 years under any conservatorship. The whole scheme died. Nikolai continued softly. That's why he panicked. That's why he ran. Tears of absolute rage spilled hot and fast down Camille's cheeks. This was no longer a financial scam. It was a violation of her very sanity. She had been sleeping beside a man who was quietly building her cage. Nikolai rounded the desk. For the first time since the wedding, he reached for her, pulling her against his solid, unyielding chest. He smelled of rain, cedar, and gunpowder. Camille didn't pull away. She buried her face in his coat, fingers digging fiercely into his lapels. "Brandt is on a plane out of the country tonight. Permanently," Nikolai murmured against her hair, his arms closing around her like a steel vault. "I came to your wedding to make certain nothing else was in motion. You are safe, Camille. I swear on it in my life." She pulled back and looked up into the eyes of the most dangerous man in New York, and the fear she'd once felt for him evaporated, replaced by a dark, intoxicating clarity. "I don't want to just be safe, Nikolai," she whispered, her voice hardening into ice. I want him destroyed. His lips curved into a predatory, breathtaking smile. Then we destroy him. The trap was set 3 weeks later, at the New Year's Eve ball at the Metropolitan Club, the pinnacle of New York society, heavily guarded and ruthlessly exclusive. Camille arrived on Nikolai's arm in a blood-red Alexander McQueen gown, dripping in Cartier diamonds. The same elites who had watched her humiliation at Belmont Hall parted like the Red Sea, whispering not with pity now, but trembling awe. She was no longer a jilted bride. She was the queen of the underworld. Grant was supposed to be hiding in Toronto, but Nikolai's network had tracked him back to Manhattan. Broke and desperate, Grant had crawled to Carlo Vitale, the rival boss who wanted Nikolai dead. Vitale had promised protection for one price: help orchestrate an assassination at the ball. As the orchestra swelled into a waltz, Nikolai led Camille onto the floor, his hand warm against her bare waist. "He's here," Nikolai murmured, lips brushing her ear like a lover's whisper. Near the east cloakroom, 3 of Vitale's men with him. "Let him come to me," Camille replied smoothly, scanning the room over his broad shoulder. "I'm not using you as bait," Nikolai growled, his grip tightening. "Nikolai." She looked up, eyes fierce. "You said we're partners. Trust me." He stared at her for one long second, jaw clenching, then gave a microscopic nod. 2 minutes, then I end it." Camille slipped away toward the powder room off the east corridor. The marble hallway was deserted. She hadn't taken 10 steps before a hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her into the dim cloakroom and slamming her against the wall hard enough to knock the breath from her. Grant stood over her, gaunt, manic, a suppressed pistol aimed squarely at her stomach. "Not so untouchable without your monster, are you?" he spat, his hand shaking violently. Camille didn't scream. She looked at the man she had almost married and felt nothing but cold, bottomless disgust. "You look pathetic, Grant. Shut up," he hissed, grinding the barrel into her ribs. "You're walking out the service elevator with me. Vitale has a car. Zorin will trade his entire empire for his precious new wife. He won't have to." The dark, lethal voice came from the doorway. Grant spun. Nikolai stood in the entrance, weapon already drawn, but before he could fire, one of Vitale's hidden gunmen rose from behind a rack of furs. A silenced shot spat through the dark. Nikolai grunted, stumbling as the round grazed his left shoulder, blood blooming instantly across white fabric. Grant swung his gun back toward Nikolai. "Drop it, Zorin. I'll put one through her heart." But Grant made one final, fatal miscalculation. He forgot whose daughter he was holding. Camille didn't cower. She drove the steel point of her stiletto heel down through the top of his foot, with every ounce of her weight. Grant howled, buckling, and in a flash of red silk she lunged, seizing the hot barrel of his gun with both hands and twisting his wrist backward until a sickening snap echoed through the small room. He screamed, the weapon clattering free. Before he could recover, Nikolai was there. He fired twice. The Vitale gunman dropped dead among the coats. Then Nikolai seized Grant by the throat, lifting the aviation air clean off his feet and slamming him into the concrete wall. "You touched my wife," Nikolai whispered, his voice a demonic growl. "Wait," Camille commanded. Nikolai paused, his hand still crushing Grant's windpipe. Grant gagged, tears of animal terror streaming down his face as he stared at her. Camille stepped forward, her red gown sweeping across the blood-stained floor. She picked up his fallen gun and looked into the eyes of the man who had planned to bury her alive in a Swiss clinic. "Ashworth Aviation was seized this morning," she said smoothly, her voice ringing with lethal grace. "I forwarded the forged board resolutions and Dr. Brandt's entire file to the Attorney General, fully exonerating the Sinclairs and burying your family's name forever. Your doctor was arrested at the airport. You have no money, you have no allies, you are a ghost." She lowered the gun and handed it to Nikolai. "I don't need to kill you, Grant," Camille whispered. "Vitale will handle it the moment he learns you failed him. Throw him out back." Nikolai's eyes burned with a dark, consuming pride as he looked at his wife. He tossed Grant to the floor like garbage. "You heard the queen. Run, little boy, before the wolves catch your scent." Grant scrambled up, sobbing, and bolted through the service doors into the freezing New York night. He wouldn't last 48 hours on those streets. Nikolai turned to Camille, pressing a hand to his bleeding shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. Camille stepped into his space, reaching up to gently touch his jaw. She looked at the blood soaking his jacket, then up into the cold, ruthless eyes of the crime lord, who had saved her life twice over. "I'm exactly where I belong," she whispered. Nikolai captured her lips in a fierce, bruising kiss that tasted of whiskey and absolute devotion. They walked out of the cloakroom together, leaving the wreckage behind them. Camille had lost a coward at the altar, but in the shadows of the underworld she had found her king. If you loved this story of ultimate betrayal, mafia romance, and a heroine who transforms from a shattered bride into a ruthless queen, give this video a thumbs up right now. The chemistry between Camille and Nikolai proves that sometimes the devil himself makes the best protector. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button and share this story with your friends. Ring the notification bell so you never miss another dramatic tale of love, revenge, and the price of betrayal.